one of the things that I see in my emails when I talk with people who want to become members is attachment styles. Insecure attachment, secure attachments, anxious attachment, and they're always spoken about in the same way, which is how these attachment styles are blocking the relationship repair. So in today's video, I want to talk a little bit deeper, a little bit more nuanced, and a little bit further how to grow past attachment styles. So the first thing that I want to say is I understand why people are drawn to attachment styles. I also want to be very clear that I don't want to dismiss attachment styles completely. Nothing is completely worthless. However, I can understand why attachment styles feel useful when it comes to understanding a relationship. The problem comes when it comes to trying to repair a relationship. Attachment styles suddenly become this big blocker rather than helping to repair the relationship. And the reason why I say that is because when I see people in my comments talking about trying to repair a relationship with an ex or trying to build a relationship with a current partner, they use attachment styles as an excuse as to why the relationship won't work, as to why they can't repair the relationship, as to why it's not their fault, as to why this relationship is unsavable. And this is the biggest problem when it comes to understanding relationships, is attachment styles are good in a beginner way, just to start to understand how feelings form and how we build our own tools. However, the limitation of attachment styles actually usually gets in the way of repairing a relationship. So it's the way I see attachment styles is that it's like paint by numbers. You know those paint by numbers things that you get where they give you the color to put red here, blue here, green here, there's some trees, and eventually it builds a picture. It doesn't make you an artist. And in fact, if you try to paint something, what you're going to do is you're going to complain that all of these rigid boundaries that you once had before don't exist, and you're going to feel completely lost. And that's what it's like with attachment styles. So it's not that they're useless, it's just that they're often used as a reason to not develop further skills. And that's the difference. I want to talk a little bit about how to grow past attachment styles and to deepen your understanding and your knowledge of human beings. So in order to move past attachment theory, we've got to move away from observing our partners to experiencing them. When we rely on labels, we create a kind of psychological distance that feels like safety, but actually becomes a barrier to understanding and connecting with your partner. So I want to break this down and understand how to dismantle these cognitive habits and replace them with the skills to build genuine human connection and actually repair a relationship. So the very first thing I want to talk about is this label trap. So in psychology, we can fall into very easily what we call categorical thinking. This is normal and it is useful. Like I said, our brains love shortcuts. We do it every day. We put people into boxes very easily. This happens in extreme ways in terms of things like racism, where we group a whole race of people as one certain, they all have the same traits and habits. We do it with religion. All people of this certain religion are this way, or all people who don't believe in God are this way. Our brains, to deal with the complexity of the world, people into categories. And it's the same with psychology. Psychology in itself places people in categories with diagnoses. These are categories to put people into in order to simplify things for our brains to process them en masse. So labeling with an attachment style, avoidant or anxious, it allows our brain to stop processing new information because it thinks it already has the answer. The problem when it comes to attachment styles is, and I've mentioned this before, so I won't dive too far into it, but is that we create this idea that an attachment style, someone's behaviors, is a fixed point. So that your attachment style is like your blood type. This is something that is unchanging and it's internal. So someone with anxious attachment acts in this way because they're always going to act that way, or they have to want to change in order to change their attachment style. So what it does is it creates this disempowering narrative to yourself as to how to repair your relationship, because you're like, they won't do this, they're fixed in this way, what's the point? And this is what I see in my comments all the time, is people saying, this doesn't apply to an anxious attachment style because of XYZ. This is what they do. So they stop trying. They don't do something that's effective, and they end up creating the situation they don't want, which is where their partner doesn't want to be around them. So the truth is, attachment is relational and it's contextual. So a person may be avoidant with a partner who is demanding, but secure with a partner who respects boundaries, as an example. So by labeling someone, having it in your head that this is a anxious attachment person, this is someone with secure attachment, whatever it is, you trigger the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you treat someone like they're going to pull away because they're avoidant, then you start to create a defensive behavior that actually causes them to pull away, which confirms your bias and actually creates a more likely scenario that they are going to avoid you. So this label is the problem in general. So like I said, it's helpful in a short-term, surface-level way, but when it comes to actually repairing a relationship and building a relationship with someone, it becomes a massive barrier, this label. And the problem with all of this attachment style stuff online and other stuff as well, when it comes to love languages and things like that, is that everyone online suddenly becomes an armchair expert. So we as human beings often turn to psychoanalysis when we feel powerless. So if you have been broken, as an example, or your partner is not speaking with you right now, it becomes a lot easier to diagnose someone because it makes it feel like you have some degree of control over your situation. This kind of becomes a form of intellectualization, which is like a defense mechanism where we use logic to avoid feeling the pain of a situation. So it's much easier to say they're anxiously attached or they're avoidant. It's a lot easier to say that because then it creates a scenario where we go, okay, so I can't control them, they're doing that, so therefore I don't need to try. I don't need to put any effort in or anything like that because it's an impossible situation. It makes me feel a little bit calmer, and I walk away from a relationship that is perfectly fixable. You don't realize how repairable it is, but you walk away from it thinking it's just them. It's a them problem because they have this diagnosis. When we become these armchair experts, we create diagnoses rather than actually understanding a human being. You know, people in my comments say, here's what an anxious avoidant partner does. But when you push them to say, what is it that they feel right now? What is it that they feel? They struggle because they've not actually thought about the feeling behind the actions. They just look at the actions and label them as, well, this is what they are. This is what they do. They are their actions. But they still don't have the skill to be able to understand and dig deeper into what is it that they feel? Do they feel scared? And if they feel scared, what are the contexts that actually give you an understanding of that fear? What have you experienced in your life where you can relate to that? People don't dig deeper than that surface level diagnosis. And that's why this armchair expert idea actually destroys intimacy and actually creates a situation where you actually understand your partner or ex-partner less, where you analyze your partner and turn them into an object to be studied rather than a subject to be known. It puts you on two different levels as human beings. If you are looking down on your partner or your ex-partner and judging their actions, not understanding who they are as a person and why they feel the way that they feel, you kill the connection because you're putting them on a different level to you. You're looking down on them and their tools because you don't understand them. And if you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a lot of people fall for this, where they read a book on attachment and they feel like an expert, right? Because they've read 300 pages on attachment styles and all this sort of stuff. And it makes you feel like you're really smart, right? Reading a book, don't get me wrong, reading books, study is great, but it creates kind of an intellectual ego for us, which prevents us from actually taking action on a situation, from actually understanding someone. Think about it this way. If you wanted to feel understood by your partner, would you feel more understood if they read a 300-page book written by somebody else on you and they never asked you one question? Or would you feel more understood if they actually took the time to give a shit and understand you as a person one-on-one? This intellectual ego prevents us from asking very simple but very important, humble questions that actually build connection and closeness. This skill building of actually getting over our egos and understanding a person as an individual is what builds that connection. You cannot build connection by intellectualizing and thinking that you understand someone from reading somebody else's categorization of a group of people who are acting in a similar way. It's wild, to be frank with you. I get why it feels like it helps, but this is where you can ask yourself the question, when you are thinking about your partner and you're thinking about this attachment style label, is it helping to build your relationship? Is this label helping you to become closer to them? Or is this label giving you a reason to push them further away and for you to step away from the relationship? That's the huge difference to ask yourself, because what I see in my comments is people giving a lot of reasons as to why they create that distance, why they are creating a distance between them and their partner. So if it's not helping you the relationship, then is that label really useful right now? This brings me on to my next point, which is how to deepen empathy and remove this bias. So to build a true connection, you've got to fight what we call the actor-observer bias. This is our tendency to see our own behaviors as situational. So I feel angry because of the way that my partner spoke to me. I feel sad because of the situation with work. I feel tired because of this. We look at everything that we do as an individual and look at all of the contexts as to why it makes sense that we did what we did, or we do what we do. I'm doing this because of all of these contexts. But the actor-observer bias is when we look at others, specifically our partner or ex-partner, look at their actions as part of their character. So they are an anxious person. They are anxiously attached. They have no capability of being able to act in a different way. Once you label their character, you treat them as their character. And that's why these attachment style labels, again, feel useful. But when it comes to actually treating someone as an individual and building that connection and repairing a relationship, it suddenly becomes a massive problem, because you're blaming their character rather than looking at all of the situations and context around them as a person. And if you think about it, it makes us a hypocrite, because we have a process to understand ourselves and forgive ourselves, but we don't apply that same process onto our partners. We basically say, I'm okay to do what I do because of all of the context, but they shouldn't be doing what they're doing because the context doesn't matter in their instance, and we become a hypocrite, right? So this is why removing the actor-observer bias, i.e. stopping blaming character, is really important to be able to rebuild the relationship and rebuild connection. So what can we do? What is actionable to be able to build these skills in order to grow past the idea of attachment styles and actually build skills that will help you to develop and repair your relationship rather than rely on surface level categories? The very first step is what I'm calling the generous interpretation exercise. So when your partner or your ex-partner does something that triggers your diagnostic brain, when you jump to this idea of they're anxiously attached, or this is such a avoidant thing to do, whatever it is, force yourself to come up with 3 situational contextual reasons for it that have nothing to do with any sort of attachment style. So as an example, she didn't text me back. Think of 3 different reasons why they may not text back. They could be in a flow state at work. Their phone could be on silent and they're enjoying a moment of peace. They're feeling overwhelmed at this moment in time, and their priority right now is not to text you back because they have a lot of other shit going on in their life. They have a long to-do list. There's a million different reasons that you can come up with that are situational, that are environmental rather than character-based. The second step is to switch from why to what. Oftentimes we get these why questions, like, why is she being so distant? Can invite defensiveness and kind of psychoanalysis. So for example, why are you being so distant? Why are you not talking to me? Why do you do this action? These why questions feel like they're building connection because it's, I'm trying to understand you. The problem is that oftentimes it can actually feel like they're being grilled and analyzed as a subject. If you switch to what questions, these what questions can invite connection rather than create this drilling or this inquisition feeling. And especially if you're trying to repair a relationship, it shows a lot more curiosity rather than analysis. For example, what has been the hardest part of your day? What is it that you feel like you need in the next few weeks to feel safe? Switching from why to what helps to get away from this psychoanalysis feeling, this inquisition, and actually starts to increase a connection between you both. Step 3 is to practice emotional granularity. Now this sounds like a big word, but trust me, it's not as complex as I made it sound. Attachment style labels are blunt instruments. To build a deep connection, use fine instruments. So if you think about, labels are like brute forcing your way through a relationship situation, a breakup. You have these easy labels that go, okay, they're anxious, they're avoidant, they're a narcissist, they're bipolar, they're borderline. We come up with these blunt instruments to just go, okay, there you go. Makes it easy for our brain to just go, goodbye, thank you, pat ourselves on the back, and not actually learn anything, not actually cultivate any sort of skills to be able to navigate any sort of relationship situations. Whereas if you want to build a deep connection with anyone, mastering the fine instruments, learning how to build the empathetic skills, learning how to be able to validate your partner, learning how to understand your own emotions and how to understand your partner's emotions, how they work, learning these fine details rather than these blunt instruments is going to help you to overcome these labels. The more granular you get in understanding your own emotions, the more granular you get in learning and understanding your partner's emotions, the more granular and deep you'll be able to build and cultivate a relationship between you both. For example, there's a difference between me saying, I guess you feel scared right now, compared to, I've been in a situation that I think is similar. One time I was at school and I knew I was going to get in trouble for something, and I could hear the teacher walking past in the hallways outside. I remember my heart pounding against my ribcage. I was that scared and I was sweating. Is that kind of what you feel right now? See, there's a big difference between the first and the second. Now, it's not about being right, but it's about showing the effort to build a finer set of tools in order to repair the connection between you both. And building these skills is what's gonna ultimately have an impact on repairing a relationship with a partner versus pushing them further and further away. And this is what I work on with all of my members, is understanding the difference between what is useful versus what is ineffective. When you focus on the tools that are effective, that is when connection is actually rebuilt. That is when connection is actually rebuilt and repair happens in a healthy way. And this is what I work on with all of my members. And if you do want to join us, then join my Relationship Bootcamp, where you'll learn the same fundamental steps that all of my members use to start turning their relationships around. All you have to do is click on the link in the description if you want to grab your spot. So learning these tools, these fine tools, rather than these blunt force tools, is really important. And this is especially true when it comes to repairing a relationship. Things like validation. A lot of people understand that validation repairs a relationship, but they misunderstand what validation is. I've actually done a deeper dive video on this, which I'll link to on the screen, but understanding validation and how that builds a connection and repairs the relationship is going to be really important. But it's important to know what not to do in order to make sure that you're learning the finer level tools rather than the blunt force tools. So I'm going to leave you with that deeper dive video, and I will see you over there.